Welcome to the Burial Plot Horror Podcast with Brenda Tolian and Joy Yaley.
Welcome to Burial Plot. Prepare yourself for a procession into all things writerly and spooky. I'm horror writer Joy Yaley, and I'm joined by my co-host, also very talented horror writer, Brenda Tolian. Today, we're chatting with a good friend and fellow horror writer, Jeamus Wilkes. Jeamus has been working as a writer and editor since 2003. In addition to his editorial services, he writes nonfiction, poetry, and fiction. Jeamus's educational experience includes commercial art and advertising, criminal justice administration, and English with a creative writing specialization. His fiction writing credits include That Time Maggie Ghosted Me, appearing in Denver Horror Collective's Terror at 5280 anthology, When the Spirit Leaveth the Flesh, appearing in Hellbound Books Publishing's Cold Flesh anthology, and the nonfiction essay on fiction narratology, Unreliable Horrors, as published in Hello Horror Volume 3, Issue 16. As of February 2021, he serves alongside Maria Abrams as co-chairperson of Horror Writers Association Denver. Jeamus lives in Golden, Colorado with his wife, stepkids, and a zoo of dogs, cats, and fish. Jeamus, welcome to Burial Plot.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add about yourself that we missed in the intro? We do like to make sure the intro is complete.
No, I think the only thing that I'm missing is I saw the name of your podcast last night and I was like, God, that is so cool. I wish I would have thought of that, but I'm glad you two thought of it. And anyway, I thought I should have had my epitaph ready, but I don't. Mm-hmm. So
that's okay. We'll catch you next time.
Did we mention that?
Also, I think others.
I was going to add that you're also a fantastic artist.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that. And thank you for reading that bio. That was something I put together for my writing stuff, but it makes me sound way more important than I probably am. But I do love art. I've been drawing ever since I can remember. Well, longer than I've been writing. And thank you for that. In fact, the Terror at 5280 anthology that I participated in, I had the privilege of illustrating that cover, and that was a lot of fun. So.
Oh, that was yours? I didn't realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that whole city of Denver, kind of turning into the pool of blood or whatever. Henry Snyder he kind of tightened it and got it ready for the parameters of a book cover, but I gave him that. It was like a black and white design, and then he punched it up with some color and did all the typesetting, and it came out great. I was happy with it.
Yeah, so. I sat next to you at the tattered cover for the book signing of that anthology. And I was scratching my name out, and you were like drawing these cool little pictures with your signature. And I was like, thanks for making me look good, Jeamus.
Well, yeah, and that's, I don't know if it's been a bad habit or a good habit, but I grew up attending church, school, wherever I was at. I was always doodling, was always sketching. I got in trouble so many times with teachers and whatnot. So, but I'm still that way. That's just me. It's not that I'm not listening to you. I just love to doodle. So.
I encourage that in my classroom. So I call them sketch notes.
Good.
Absolutely.
So you're now the new, do we call it a co-chair of the?
Yeah, co-chairperson.
For the, it's the Colorado Springs or Denver? I forget.
It's Denver. Yeah, HWA Denver. It used to be known as the Mile High Chapter, but we're kind of just hitting the restart button with all of it. And Our official title is HWA Denver, and I'm the co-chairperson alongside Maria Abrams. And I have the privilege of doing that. Yeah, that came about. I've known the current HWA president, John Palisano. We became friendly on Facebook when I was years ago. I was one of the co-founders and hosts MCs for an event called Colorado Horror Con, and I was trying to get John to come to that event just because I had become familiar with him on Facebook. Long story short, John and I became friendly acquaintances up to the point where I'd probably call us friends now. And he just needed someone to. They were restarting HWA Denver. There was an acknowledgement that HWA, not to get into the long of it, but HWA kind of went through a time where their name was getting dragged through mud. Some of it legit, some of it not legit. And there was just hey, you know what, we need to retool this and revamp this. And they began to do it. And it was very clear to me that they were wanting to do something different. When Lisa Morton became president, then what I would call the tide of new and good changes started to take place. And just this past year, John became president, and it was really refreshing. John is so, his personality is at least from what I've seen, is so low key and humble. It's kind of exactly what the HWA needed. And he's at the time said, hey, what's going on in your life? Do you want to think about helping me do the HWA chapter? Do you have an interest in that? And he's like, it's not a done deal. There's several people that have expressed interest in it. And I was like, sure. So I put together a presentation for him. I wrote it out. And somewhere along the way in the process, it was like, do you have a co-chairperson in mind? Because going forward with our chapters, we want to have a co-chair, which is a great idea. That way there's no what I call petty tin horn dictatorships in these small groups. And I said no, but I tell you what, I know it needs to not be me. Now that sounds like a ridiculous statement, but what I meant by that and what I explained to John was you need to find somebody who is not a white cisgender male. And I would love to co-chair with, because I think with the HWA going forward, as much as I would love the opportunity, it's a 2-year term, which started this past January. That other person needs to not be me in that sense. And so John was great. Here's Maria Abrams. Good luck to the both of you. And so we both got thrown in, and it's worked out great. We've had kind of a slow start. Without getting into too much detail, HWA Colorado Springs, they've got a great thing going on there. And so there was kind of not what I would call an exodus, but there was kind of a transfer to HWA Colorado Springs. I can't say enough good things about them. They've got with Karina Bassett and Hillary Dodge, among other people, and they've got some amazing members there. Travis Heerman being one of them. So a lot of people had kind of migrated over there. So right now, HWA Denver, we're looking for just fresh faces. And not, I think these first couple of years, the thrust of the events are going to be, yeah, it's great if you want to come in. This is not a mass recruiting event. We just kind of want to show something. Here's what we're all about. If you want to join, great. If not, you're part of the horror community and you're still welcome. So going forward, I think that'll be great. Maria is an amazing writer, and she is a graphic artist. Only her skills are much more cutting edge than mine. Mine are old school. Everything that I do with the T-square and triangle, she can point and click. In fact, she could probably do everything on her phone that she creates. But it's a good combination, and I'm looking forward to doing more things with her. We've already got a couple of events this year in mind when the world begins to open up, and I have gone on and on and on nonstop talking, and I apologize, but that's what's going on with me and HWA Denver.
Great. Is the HWA Denver involved at all with StokerCon? Yes,
absolutely. Horror Writers Association, they have awards for different categories in the they're right now they're kind of like the Oscars for horror writers, and that has been an event that's kind of evolved and grown over the years. Yes, so StokerCon kind of brings all of that together. There's the awards ceremony, there's author readings. The guests of honor will usually do something live and have a question and answer period. StokerCon this year, 2021, in a technical sense, it's Denver. In fact, the souvenir book was created by Josh Viola and his Hex Publishers, which I've known Josh for a few years. He's a great guy, great writer. Hex Publishers is great. Long story short, Blucifer, which is kind of the theme on the cover, and it's outstanding. I mean, it's Blucifer in all of his demonic glory, and Josh is a graphic artist. We are so gifted here in Colorado with HWA members who aren't just writers, but they're graphic artists. And Josh's illustration on this cover, and he was actually a co-artist, I believe, if I'm saying this correctly, and I cannot think of that other artist's name. I'll probably bring it up here on the side and say it later. But with the theme of Blucifer, and hey, it was going to be in Denver, but we had no idea. They kind of set these things way in advance, kind of like the Super Bowl. They didn't know about COVID at the time they set it up, and so Denver has the fortune of StokerCon is going to be here 2 years in a row. It's the Denver theme in the virtual world. Of course, we're not getting together here in Denver with any kind of mass meeting just for safety reasons. Although the world is beginning to open back up, we still need to play it safe for a while. But it will be here in person next year in 2022 as well. So the same plans, they're just moving it forward a year, and this year they're making it virtual, but they're still kind of using Denver as the highlight for that. So I'm looking forward to it. It's my first time being intimately involved with StokerCon. Previous years, it was really just kind of a scheduling thing, and now it's landed here in my lap. It's in my city. Not only do I not have an excuse, but I'm co-chair at HWA Denver, so I'm damn well going to be there online and participate. And we've got lots of cool things going on with that, with the author readings. Now, Brenda, are you doing
yeah, so I'm doing an author reading, but I'm also a part of the Anne Radcliffe part of it. So I'm presenting my critical work for that as well. Recording it's been so fun with dogs in the neighborhood and everything. But I'm very excited. Yeah, I was excited because I thought, I'd finally get to meet everybody in person. But I think virtual will be fun. And then maybe the next year I can convince Joy we should just get a hotel room and be wild, crazy ladies in the city of Denver when it happens again. So.
That's
Absolutely.
that is a great idea. I was telling my wife Michelle, even though it's here, it'd be fun, just to get a hotel room and to, kind of have an event within our own city. And we could easily do it. It's like, yeah, we've got a ton of pets and stuff like that, but we wouldn't have to leave them at a kennel or anything. We just come home real quick, make sure they're fed, and then go back to the event.
Yeah,
but that's a great idea.
I'm like, hopefully it's not the first time I meet Denver Horror Collective buddies in person. Hopefully that happens sooner. But yeah, I'm totally psyched to go. And then I'm also nervous because my mentor, Mario Acevedo, Regis, is going to be there, and he's actually in the book with for this year's horror writers is for StokerCon, the book with the beautiful Lucifer on it and everything like that. So
excellent.
Ooh, he's like, I'll be watching your stuff. I'm like, oh God, okay. Hopefully do a good job.
You will. We're not worried. And we know where Mario lives just in case, so it's all good.
Oh, did you? Okay, I don't know that because he's my mentor. So
I have no idea.
I love Mario. Some of the best author readings I've been to were ones that he participated in. And
oh yeah, him and Felix. I'm like always disappointed if he doesn't read. I mean, I love all of his stuff, but yeah, whenever he reads Felix, I'm like, yes, Felix.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So could we ask about your creative process?
Oh, wow. My creative process, what's interesting is I don't know that I've done more developing of what that creative process is than I have over the past 2 years. And I'll explain what that means. I really had to pin it down because I wanted to be able to start writing consistently. So it kind of starts with what I like. I've had to discover the hard way over the years that to really don't get involved in a project or start something that you are not 100% into. And that was very hard for me to adjust to because sometimes it can be not counterproductive, but you're wanting to participate in a lot of these anthologies, you're wanting to do a lot of them, but I don't want to force anything. Case in point, within the last few years, I've had some close friends and associates, and also within the DHC, the Denver Horror Collective. I became a member of the Denver Horror Collective in I want to say late 2018 or probably early 2019. Trying to recall, but and some of them have associations with publishers, and including the DHC itself. And I was already working on had a good ghost story kind of cooking up in my mind related to online dating, and so the timing was just really good with that first anthology because it was and it happened to take place in Denver, and that was one of the requirements was, look, if there could be some kind of association with Denver or even just Colorado, in general. And so that worked out. When it came to the Wendigo, and also there was, what I appreciate about DHC is that it's very fair. It's no done deal. Just because you're a member doesn't mean you're going to appear, in the anthology. But there was also an invitation. One advantage that all of us had, and you all know this, is that we were welcome to submit, and we got the heads up on that, and had a little bit of a jump on what the theme was. And I love the subject of the Wendigo, but I just was nothing was there. I wasn't inspired with it. And I don't know how many times I began that story and then just had to step away. I didn't want to force something that I wasn't enjoying. There are some writers, and I have nothing but respect for them. It's like a switch, and they can turn it on. In fact, a lot of them have what I would call commercial success outside of what they normally like to write. And if somebody, you know, gives them a phone call, hey, how'd you like to write a book for this series, or, you know, contribute to this, and bam, like that, you know, that, or they've got something in their trunk that they can tweak and modify. And what I've discovered about myself is I'm just not that way. I have to love the project in order to be able to do it. Even as a commercial artist, and the whole idea of a commercial artist is that word commercial. We always associate it with TV commercials, but it's you know, its root word is commerce. You're doing it for a check, and not only that, but it's there's a certain brand of marketing, and you are doing what the client wants. Sometimes you can have that good relationship, and the client's like, "Hey, go for it. Do what you want. I've worked with you long enough. I trust you." But then there's a lot of times where they're really wanting to ratchet that down, and they need X, and I'm just not able to produce X because I'm not interested in it. Because when you are working on a project for a check and you're not enjoying it, it's torture. It's worse than a day job. And I have a day job that I happen to like. But I've had day jobs that I've hated, and I'm telling you, the only thing worse than that was doing something that I happen to love, but it's in a realm that I just have no interest in. So my process to all of that to get back to it is I really had to nail it down. Okay, what does John like? And so if I'm kind of in a groove and I'll get on a kick, but I know that it's going to stick for a while, then I will probably do something that's kind of in that vein. Case in point, I'd kind of become, there's a whole subgenre within horror. Probably the best way to describe it is the occult detective. And I love that idea. Now, the occult detective can be what I would say, you know, accidental, kind of in the X-Files vein. Yes, Mulder and Scully work for the FBI, but they happen to be addressing cases that, you know, are not necessarily, you know, inside the realm of what the FBI normally does. Hence the X-Files, and they get to work out of the basement. And then there's the very specific occult detective. Yes, this is what I do. This is what I research. I am an expert, you know, in this realm. And I kind of love that whole combination, whether it be the accidental occult detective or the one who's specific. One of my all-time favorite characters, and it's kind of ironic, and this is not a slam against Clive Barker, one of my all-time favorite characters is probably one who is the least fleshed out, and that is his occult detective character, Harry D'Amour. He's kind of it's kind of interesting. He's kind of a Bogart type character, very plain. Yes, I just saw a dimension open up to the portal of hell, but he takes just a very classic detective approach to, okay, here's what we do first to investigate. You know, there's none of this, oh my God, it's demons. You know, it's, in fact, he kind of has a, oh shit, here we go again, you know, kind of attitude. And I love that. I kind of like that ambiguity with that character, because you find out more things about him, but then you find out there's 9 more things you don't know about him. And so I kind of want to take that approach. So my process right now, it kind of blossomed into, gosh, just for lack of a better word, a whole franchise. I mean, within a week, I had an idea for 13 books for this guy, with a definitive opening and an end. And so I think for the creative process, it has to start with interest. You know, what do you love? What is holding your attention at that time? And then you just kind of let it naturally evolve at that point. So I guess if I have any advice to offer anyone writing, and I don't care if they're a veteran or whatnot, make sure that it's something that you love. I have some very everything from moderately successful to very successful writer friends, and I'm not calling them out on this, but some of them, they're not as happy as others with what they're doing. Yeah. And it's because they're writing for that check. I won't just anyone trying to make a living at anything, I'm not going to discourage them from that. Do it, but don't do it at the cost of something you love, and don't end up hating something that you once loved because you're going for that carrot. And so I think for the creative process, start with interest and run with it. The best advice I've ever heard from Stephen King, I don't know that there's been a writer more quoted than him, and most of it, people will copy and paste things from On Writing, but the best writerly advice, it came from him, and it was a very simple thing. If you want to write, you must read a lot, and you must write a lot. Yeah. And that's a dude that's committed to write. I mean, he spends several hours a day just reading. I'm like, how do you have time to do that when you're cranking out 162,000 books?
Right.
But he does it. I mean, and he is just committed to it. And he's like, look, I learn every day because I'm reading. So.
Yeah. And reading outside of the genre too, I think is another caveat to that too. Just because you write in horror, don't just read horror, read outside so you get some other ideas. Has been a savior for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading, read outside the genre. In fact, I think Steve Rasnick-Tim, he was commenting about something online, but anyway, he's like, the past few years, I'm going to be honest, the bulk of my reading has not been horror. I've been reading, outside of horror, and I think that's great, because horror is such a big sphere. All of the genres kind of spill into it, somehow. And
I think you gave that advice when we had the book study. What was that, last week? He said something to that effect too. I remember him saying something like that. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right.
So what are you currently reading, John?
Well, I thought you would never ask.
I ask everyone, what's your current read? Because I need to add to my to-be read list.
And of course, I'm being sarcastic. Right now, I'm reading Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. I've had almost kind of an explosive interest in not just psychology, but psychotherapy specifically, and how it's kind of really even to this day, I want to be careful in saying this, but in a lot of realms of psychology, psychotherapy is still kind of the redheaded stepchild. It's not really respected or taken seriously, and a lot of psychologists have ascribed that there's a little bit of magical thinking processes going on with psychotherapy. And the more I became curious about it and began to study it, and it just became fascinating to me, and it has helped me so much in what I'm doing, in my writing within the horror genre that I love so much. And that's my nonfiction reading. And my fiction reading, I'm reading Ink by Jonathan Mayberry.
Nice.
And Jonathan Mayberry, he's one of those. I'm jealous of what he's able to do. He's able to do straight up commercial fiction. In fact, he's participated in many things, many popular franchises out there, but then he writes his own stuff that's just amazing, and it's so good that it ends up becoming its own franchise. So I just kind of started reading Jonathan's work within the past year, and that's what I'm currently reading right now. I'm also reading Tim Wagner's Writing in the Dark, and that's such a good how-to. I have to read in all seriousness. I'll read about 3 or 4 pages, and then I have to chew on it for sometimes a few days, just because there's a lot within it that I really want to savor. Yes, I'll reread it, but my first read on something, that's always a special event, and I kind of want to savor it.
I think Joy and I have both been poring over that book as well, since it came. Has a lot of really great advice.
A couple weekends ago, he had an online writers con that I attended.
Oh, cool.
And that was really, really good. And he's so personable and down to earth and humble and funny. I mean, it was really good. He's coming out with a workbook to accompany Writing in the Dark. So that'll be exciting when that comes out. I'd love to get my hands on that too.
Yeah, that's great. And that it's it's one of those perfect books. In fact, sometime I'd love to outside of this setting, pick you all's brains as far as that book goes. We might have to have some kind of book club or meetings over it. But it's I love it. I love what he talks about, and I love how he shares a lot of his life and experience in a very honest way, and not a self-congratulatory way. So
welcome back to Burial Plot, where we're chatting with horror writer and creative Jeamus Wilkes. Jeamus, earlier you were talking about your creative process and the different things that you're reading, and we were really hoping that you would share a piece of your writing with us.
Yes.
I will. And this is I was about to use the kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That might be a little too morbid energy, but it's a little bit biographical, and it's not because I love talking about myself. I wrote a blog entry in February of 2019, and I had a friend who told me, look, this can help some people, and you need to get this out there. But it unpacks a lot of why I write in the genre I do. I know that a lot of horror writers, they hate the question, why do you write horror? In fact, they even present the question that way. Why do you write horror? But I think a lot of times it's an honest question from people who are just curious. They're not necessarily looking for something salacious on you, but whatever their motivation is. I always told myself I'd be ready for this question, and I would direct them to my blog, not just for self-promotional reasons, but it's like, look, I kind of put it all out there in this blog entry, and it gave me a chance to try and develop my writer chops more, just for it has different POVs in it. So rather than keep talking about it, I think I'll just read from it, and then it's a little long, but we can stop at whatever point. So if you guys want to give me a time limit, that's fine, and you can edit any of this out that you want. So the name of the entry it was the first blog entry. Actually, it was the second blog entry I made. It's called My Source of Dread: Why I Read and Write Horror. I was 5 years old and playing in the dirt side yard in front of my childhood home when I met my first clown. I distinctly remember one summer day when a man dressed as a clown and carrying balloons. The colors black and yellow seemed prominent in my memory. Walked by my house and tried to sell me one of the balloons. I don't remember how much they were exactly, but it didn't matter. I had no change on me. When I told him I had no money, he seemed irritated and he raised a hand like he was going to hit me. And then he skulked away. The whole time he was yelling back at me, "They're only pennies, kid. They're only pennies. You can't even buy one? One? Only pennies." Well, this frightened me in an indescribable way. For weeks, I was scared he would come back and kill me because I didn't buy a balloon. Or worse, he would just stand outside my window. Why do you read and write horror? Although some horror writers, that is, those of us who have the guts to actually use the word horror as a descriptor or title of the genre they primarily work in, like to answer that question, others don't. The ones that don't like answering it have too often had that question contextually framed as a way for them to be dressed down by literary bigots, or shamed for doing what they enjoy and even love to do. This inaugural and biographical blog post entry for Jeamus After Midnight answers a big part of why do you read and write horror when it's directed at me? And here's where pills come into the picture. I picked up my renewed prescription for desvenlafaxine yesterday. I've been taking the antidepressant steadily for years now, whereas it comes with its own set of side effects. The med has been nothing short of a miracle in my mental health life. The road to this med has been a long trail littered with the medicine bottles of failures and more failures of taking the bad advice of others who were or aren't medical professionals. Even more failures came via listening to and believing the fire and brimstone condemnations of pill popping to sin easier. My own general stupidity and ignorance on the subject had to get personal research, self-discovery, and bona fide medicine dropped into it like a ton of bricks. Over the years, more than one doctor has come to the conclusion that I struggle, at the least, with cyclothymia and PTSD, and all the things that come with those two and their overlapping ripples. They can build on each other in a cascade effect manner and make life, especially an interior life, the purest of hells. The desvenlafaxine, Prestique is its original and outrageously priced corporate pharmaceutical incarnation, helps tremendously with the cyclothymia and PTSD, and it allows me to maintain some level of creativity in my art and writing life. So far, the adverse side effects have been worth the peaceful and closer to equilibrium life I want. A bonus is the retention of art appreciation and art creation in their many forms. I share this with you as a backdrop for the reason my girlfriend and my now wife, this is a blog entry from 2019, of almost 3 years expressed dismay over a comment I made recently after returning from picking up my prescription at the pharmacy. That comment was, "Well, I can behave for another month." Other past comments by me have included, "I got my good boy pills," and something to the effect of not having to worry about hulking out. My partner was dismayed as she explained she felt like the comments, while they may be intended to be a joke, minimize mental health issues with people in general, but they were specifically disrespectful to myself and the battles that I faced. She knows of the gritty struggle that I've had. She's not a fan of my pinch amp for self-deprecation. In the context of our lives, relationship, and what she knows of me and how I'm trying to continue to grow, she's right to be dismayed by the dismissive and offhand comments like this. And in thinking on this subject, it made me recall the road here, the one to where I'm at now, the efforts I have made and will make on this road into the future. It's overall positive and in fact a beautiful thing, but not without struggle. In that struggle, the horror genre has been positively cathartic for me. I won't get into a full-blown defense and or apologetic here for the bursting cornucopia the horror genre is in this already protracted blog entry. But I encourage anyone who seriously wants to study the subject to also include looking at the concept, practice, and etymology of catharsis. In an ironic and stoic sense of the obstacle is the path, horror isn't just an amusement park for many. It's bona fide therapy. Bringing it down to my subatomic particle life in the context of this consuming and chaotic cosmos, horror fiction helps me slay my dragons. To bring it a bit more palpable into the horror genre and its myriad subgenres, it helps me destroy my monsters and helps me be okay and all right and copacetic and even chipper at times with being what many see as a monster. Many can warp or disfigure monster and horror to fit comfortably in their worldview. But all it means to me is to embrace and gasp, even love myself, imperfections included. I tell you all of the above so that I can tell you all of the below. In autumn of 2017, I caught a bus to the nearest movie theater to see it. It was a chilly and bleak sky Saturday. My car was on its umpteenth stay in the repair shop, and my girlfriend was gone for the day on an activity with her two youngest kids. The dial of the skies had been rotating between overcast and full-on bursts of rain, and I was in the mood to visit the closest theater to see something scary. This wasn't just another trip to the cinema, though. Since It was first published, I've had a long-time relationship with Stephen King's novel. For those who aren't familiar with It, it's King's magnum opus on the monster horror realm. The 1,000-plus page tales about a group of longtime friends and their decades-long war against an extremely powerful and millennia-old shape-shifting monster who appears to them most often as a clown named Pennywise. By relationship with King's book, I mean one that extends into the personal and beyond any shared public fascination with the tome or the film adaptations, art creations, and critical theory that it has inspired. Let me explain the relationship, and in so doing, reveal to you my source of dread. And then we'll get back to this oft-used phrase of mine. If I take the long way in doing so, please understand it's because I'm delicately showing you things that have affected this thorny, beautiful, terrifying, wonderful, blue, black, and gray pathed timeline of my life. I can only peel the scab off so fast, and in so doing, continue to heal the wounds and mind the good, or better, things in this journey. If this exercise helps anyone else who struggles with cyclothymia, PTSD, or any number of other behavior and mood disorders, still disorders to me, as they are not a positive thing in my life, then all the better. Let my tale be cathartic for other strugglers or sufferers. One weekend in late 1983, I was on a bus heading back from Phoenix, Arizona to my hometown of El Paso, Texas. It was a bus full of exhausted fellow church members, and we were heading back home after attending the wedding of one of our co-pastors. Remembering the big freaking deal made about it at church, I recall the church members, including me, viewing this union in much the same way the general public at the time fawned apoplectically over Charles and Diana's royal wedding. That includes the sugary buildup, the ceremony itself, and the sacrament denouement. This wedding trip was right smack in the middle of the time my dad was beginning his soon-to-be lost battle with colon cancer. He was too sick from the side effects of chemotherapy and radiation to attend the wedding, and my mom was staying home with him in El Paso. I had no parents or family members with me on this trip. I thought it would be fun to hang out on a Southwestern road trip via bus with other church youth members, singles, and a few younger families. And even as I begin to talk about this wedding road trip, I find myself needing to shift point of view in my narration. Second person seems more comfortable in that it moves away from me and shares the burden with you. So you are a kid of 15 now, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed male who's beginning to exit adolescent awkwardness and come upon the radar of the opposite sex. You've hit your 15th birthday this past August. Your thoughts stay in the realm of the tug of war between theological, social strongholds of evangelical Christianity and the wonders of females. You want to get to know females more. You're beginning to stop thinking of them in an objective, childish, and clinical sense as females. You don't want to call them girls anymore because they aren't girls anymore in your social sphere. They're young women, and they are awesome. But your experience on this bus trip will trip you up for a bit. It will make you more homophobic than you already are. Ironically, it hurts your relationship with women for a long time. It will eventually haunt your marriage and be a major factor in killing it. There's many factors, but this is a big one. Because when the new family trusted friend, we'll call him X, a type A personality great in business and holding forth as a super Christian, sees that you are tired and encourages you to stretch your legs across him in the very back row of the bus, an extra long, inadequately padded seat. You make the mistake of taking him up on his offer, as this will take you down a path of regret, self-loathing, and sorrow that you almost don't come back from. He's about 7 years older than you, young, yes, but in hindsight, still a full-on predator. He conveniently drapes a blanket across you and him. He's still sitting upright, and the ancient bus is kind of crowded but cold, and the reclining seats are pretty worthless. So the blanket is fine, and you lay across him, not knowing any better, because up to this point, you've never had a reason not to trust other adult males in the church. Men of God we are, setting examples for the world around us, so they stand a chance of wanting to be like us. You know, be like us so they don't burn in hell for being, well, the world. The world is worldly and you are not. And you are drifting off into sleep when you realize your penis is forming an erection. Not because you're attracted to X, but in the fog of waking up, you realize his hand is firmly stroking your crotch through your jeans. And you're horrified. Not just because he's male and that it's wrong, but because it's sex and it's before marriage and all of it is wrong. And turning it up a notch in the horror level, he has this dead look on his face and in his eyes. The kind of look that sordid memes you would see on the internet decades later would label the rape face. You're frightened. You're a boy who simply does not know how to handle this situation except to try to get up and get away. X is betting on your embarrassment to not make a scene, and he wins the bet. The bus is so freaking cold and loud that even if you spoke in a raised voice or even yelled, it would be some time before others would notice. You don't know whether or not he would deny it to others. And you're just a boy wanting to be a man of God. X is already a man of God. So you try something simple. You try to get up, and you realize for the first time that X is very strong. With little effort, his crotch stroking hand, at which this point seems to be trying to find every vein in your penis, barely lets you raise yourself an inch before he pushes you firmly back down, his dead eyes still looking straight ahead. The rape face you see in the so dark back of the bus. When Stephen King later describes the deadlights of it, they will remind you of the corpse-like eyes of X. How they would run through your mind on repeat again and again and again. How deep the bitterness would grow. How much you wanted to smash those eyes. Deadlights. Right the fuck in. But you're in the moment on that bus, and he's pushed you back down, and you have to make your next move. Without really thinking, you put your finger to that bundle of nerves between his collarbone and trapezius, and you keep pushing it in harder until it visibly hurts him, and he finally relaxes his hand. You throw the blanket off and are up, ready to head back to your normal seat when X stops you. He's grabbing you by the arm, quickly apologizing, but you can barely hear him over the grinding gears and rattles of the ancient bus. Incredibly, tacked onto his non-apologies are questions directed at you as to why you would think God would test you in this way. If there's some sort of secret sin in your heart that might have brought this all about. Like the dumb kid you are, you actually buy some of X's predatory bullshit. You make it back to your seat and contemplate your relationship with him. Only years later, you would learn a word you could attach to what you're feeling. He was grooming me. Oh God, he was grooming me. When you arrive back in El Paso and everyone is carpooling from the church to their homes, you end up in the same vehicle with him. On the sly, he continues to apologize, his arm carefully placed around you in a non-threatening by appearances way. He will do this, sickening pseudo-apologizing several times over the next few weeks. Because you're a dumb kid, you believe him. And you tell no one for a long, long time. And the hurt comes to the surface years later when you've decided to frame this in a non-fiction piece to be reviewed and critiqued by your peers in a horror writers group. The emotions are rawer than ever, but the act of writing about it is catharsis, so you continue. You decide more distance in the narration is needed. You're going to have to move in a third person if you, Jeamus, are to continue this without completely losing your shit. But Jeamus didn't lose his shit and kept writing. He wrote for nearly an hour before his partner, who'd been binge watching Frankie and Grace on Netflix, called from the living room. "What you working on, babe?" Michelle had been expressing interest in Jeamus's writing of late, but this made him somewhat easy, as he knew horror was not a genre Michelle particularly liked. but she might be interested in this piece, as it was somewhat biographical essay. But clowns, creepy clowns were in it, and their presence was only going to increase further into the piece. Jeamus stopped briefly, scratched the neck of his Chihuahua dog Xavier, who'd been sitting at Jeamus's feet. Jeamus sighed. "I'm writing scary stuff, hon." "Gotcha," Michelle said. This wasn't a dismissal so much as it was shorthand for the understanding Jeamus and Michelle had. Michelle didn't mind Jeamus writing horror, and she only ever supported him in it. But Jeamus's understanding was that she would not read it, or any horror for that matter. She wouldn't do so for the same reasons many people don't engage in horror or darker fiction chock full of boogeymen, folklore nightmares, plain old monsters, ghosts, serial killers, other tweaked fears made manifest, and the accompanying trembling. Jeamus would someday make it available to her to read so she could understand him and unpack it a little more, but he would not push it. The rapid clicking on the Chromebook keyboard continued. Jeamus remembered that after the incident on the bus and the subsequent weeks and weeks of X over apologizing and his tears and promises to never do something like that again, and I apologize, I lost my voice. Also, let me know if we're going way too long. Let's see here. Never to do something like that again, and the promises to get counseling and help and all of the rest of that happy horseshit. Somewhere in there, Jeamus actually forgave X and resumed friendship with him. And trust was renewed. 2 years later, the renewed trust was destroyed. One night when Jeamus and other church member guests were visiting X at X's brother's house, that X was house sitting while the brother was out of town, Jeamus was stretched out on the couch asleep. The other guests had left, leaving Jeamus alone. X again made a predatory move, this time with a crotch stroke and an attempted kiss. No words were exchanged this time, no bullshit apologies and confessions of sin, no questions as to why the terrible devil might be tempting Jeamus with homosexuality. By now, Jeamus was somewhat getting clued into X's predatory bullshit, and Jeamus simply left. He was mad at himself all over again, wondering why this kept happening. Jeamus's fear was that if he were to share these X encounters with anyone, he himself would be accused of the soul-flaying crime of homosexuality, and X would twist this to his advantage. Jeamus was 19 when the second assault went down, but technically an adult and still so wet behind the ears he had gills. Less than 2 weeks later, when X made it known to the church that he was moving to another city, Jeamus was relieved. This time, when more apologies and tears came from X, he bugged out to another state. These apologies and tear-filled excuses, turning into mini lectures, were never in the presence of any other witnesses. Jeamus simply nodded to end the conversations and false humility sessions as soon as possible. X would be spreading his type A peacock feathers in another city and would be out of Jeamus's life. Jeamus finally told someone close to him about the X assaults. What he went through is minimized by his confidant's shoulder shrugging equivalent of a reaction. It was something terse and quipped, something in the neighborhood of sometimes bad things happen and we just have to live through it. And Jeamus swore to never tell anyone again. He still struggled with the idea maybe some of this was his fault. It's sort of implied by the person he shares the stories of his assaults from X with. And here's where the creepy and murderous clowns re-enter the picture. Sometime between the bus assault and the couch assault, two things happen. One, Jeamus's father died in 1984. This would wound him for years to come. Two, when trust was renewed with X, Jeamus was with X when X was shopping in a newly conceived store warehouse experience that went by the name Sam's. It was late September of 1986. And among those interminable aisles of bulk packaged granola bars, 6-packs of canned shaving cream, and analog televisions the size and weight of Jupiter, there was a 4x4 table that had stacks and stacks of the newest book by Stephen King, It. At this point, Jeamus is able to cruise control back in a first-person narration because the panic and stress have subsided, and I can talk of these things again without running and screaming. When I first saw those stacks of It, I skimmed through a copy quickly while X was on another aisle getting some type of hair product or vitamin supplement to further help his mirror preening. You see, for a couple of years, I had been reading horror on the sly. Reading worldly novels and frequenting worldly movies was, and still is, a no-no in churches of the type I was affiliated with. And reading and watching horror genre stories was an even worse crime. For every time I open the pages of a scary story, I'm sure a kitten died somewhere for that thought crime. You see, at this point, it's hard to leave sarcasm out, as I could make a point about the Bible being quite the frightening epic horror novel all by itself. This includes the wages of sin coming in the form of entire nations getting wiped out by the most gruesome ways and means. Tent pegs being driven through the skulls of sleeping dipshits, a strongman bludgeoning and beating enemy soldiers to death with the jawbone of an ass, special forms of head-wrenching execution for those involved in bestiality, and hundreds of other like-minded stories. But I won't do that. Instead, I'll make sure that you know this. In the context of my church at that time, horror equals bad, bad, bad. But it was too late for me. Not long after the bus episode and beginning to endure the subsequent self-serving monologues and bullshit from X, I had borrowed a copy of Peter Straub's Ghost Story and discovered a realm where embattled humanity engaged fear at its core. A story about how evil was engaged in order to destroy it, or sometimes just to survive it. It could be told in the prose elegance of brute force. I enjoyed reading horror. It was cathartic. I even enjoyed tales with bad endings because it helped keep things real for me. Real in my mind that not everything bad could be vanquished by finite humanity. And so there I was, thrilled to see that Stephen King had written the ultimate monster story, the story of a group of friends trying to survive it and eventually destroy it. When X returned from selecting items much more righteous in nature than the hooks of hell springing forth from the copies of it, he saw me setting a copy back down. This provoked a disappointed and disapproving head shake from him. And he walked up to the display table, threw open a copy, and briefly read aloud from the text. It was from the scene where an adult version of the character Beverly Marsh is visiting her childhood home in Derry, Maine. She is served tea from a friendly older woman who turns out to be Pennywise, and the clown was serving Beverly blood and filth in a teacup by the scene's end. After X read the description of what's in the teacup, he flashed a look at me, deadlights, and tells me he's disappointed I would even dare crack open a book like this one, when I already know what's inside. At that moment, I would make it my goal in life to be nothing like X. In my heart, I knew what my talisman would be against this pervasive asshole, a talisman against this persistent and unrepentant narcissist. Horror. Horror was the talisman I needed to deal with this egotistical fuck and destroy the wrecking ball he took to my ego and self-worth. I didn't realize the fullness of the event and its implications at the time, but I would grow to understand it later. Stephen King's It was my Bible to use in redemption of myself, forgiveness, and for allowing myself to be a sucker and near disciple of this monster predator and his wretched shadow. And in a metaphorical sense, it became my textbook on how to battle and destroy monsters. I fired my opening shot with Ghost Story, but it became the power core. That wasn't the only moment of dark profundity blooming in my head after seeing mountains of copies of Stephen King's It. The other moment that landed on me was tied to my young childhood. The word and name Pennywise dug up a still scratching corpse in my memory. They're only pennies, kid. They're only pennies, and you can't even buy one, only pennies. I've gone over that day again and again in my head, wondering if my brain implanted things there based on King's book. Did I only remember it half right? And the other half was created by outgassing images and emotions from King's tale? I don't know, but it was so real. The fear I recall is palpable in the very room I sit to write this story. The final sexual assault from X occurs in 1993 when, in a group hug moment, in the context of a small reunion party of former church members, he uses the occasion to do a reach around and grope me. I am so stunned by this and so disgusted by my own stupidity in putting myself in any kind of situation with this person over and over that I shrink away to the bathroom later that night and I wash myself so vigorously my skin is raw and bleeding in places. Over the years, I chalk up visit after visit to shrinks, counselors, and I buy all the books on how to heal, the whole ball of smelly wax, the whole ball of clown and white makeup. And so it brings me back to the day I caught the bus to see it. As the tale winds down to the climax, catharsis is so powerful for me that I begin to tear up when the losers finally get the upper hand on Pennywise. In my mind's eye, I'm beginning to vanquish the clown horde dead-lighted eyes of X and the predatory marks he left on me, and I am destroying the smelly, half-shaven, gate-mouthed salesman jester creep who verbally terrorized me for not buying one of his greasy black and yellow balloons. I am destroying those things that are my source of dread. The confluence of these monsters at different stages of my life, leading up to one great grand guignol of horrific neurosis, is falling back into the endless dark, falling back and away from me it goes because I've smashed it squarely on its head. Catharsis. I put a serious hurt on monsters that have hurt me for so long, and then I simply melt down. I cry leaving the theater. I cry in the rain walking to the bus taking me home. I cry when I see a sewer drain at the bus stop. I cry when I flip at the bird and spit on it. And I don't see any eyes, deadlights, shining out from its dark grated holes. It sucks in greasy street water. I cry my fucking eyes out the rest of the day. I cry because I'm letting go and it feels good, yet so alien to me. It does more for me than all those hours on the shrink's couch, more than all those hours spent begging God in prayer for this haunted house inside my head to heal up. Why do you read and write horror? Because every time I do, I'm sending creepy clowns back to hell. I still have those desvenlafaxine. I still have to use desvenlafaxine and take precautions to ensure my mental health stays healthy and steady. It's highly likely I'll have to do this until I'm dead. I have battle scars, but they are no longer gangrenous. They're a little rough and pinkish, but they are reminders that the clown in the sewer in the back of that bus and the clown who slithered through my neighborhood are gone. Their faces and noise are echoes from a giant yet shrinking standpipe that I continue to walk away from. I hear Michelle call from the kitchen. "What you working on, babe?" "I'm writing scary stuff, hon, but I think it's good, and you're welcome to read it whenever you're ready." I feel her hand on my shoulder. Our history with exes and hard knocks doesn't make us impervious to relationship difficulties, but in Michelle's touch, it typifies our history in that I can feel the surety that no scary story I have behind me will scare her away. "I'm ready," she tells me. Why do you read and write horror? Because I want it out of my head, heart, and life. I want it up there on the page. I want it behind the keystrokes. I want it behind the strength I need to destroy my source of dread. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry that was way too long. Please edit and hack it up as much as you need to.
Wow. Wow. I've read that blog post before, Jeamus, but to hear you read it, wow. I too have scars from evangelical Christianity. And I do think that that is some of where I'm working it out is in the writing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful, powerful.
You're welcome.
Speaking of Tim Wagner, he in a podcast said that horror is like exorcism through entertainment. Yep. And I could so, resonate with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think listening to you read that as a queer woman, but also as someone who's been harmed in my childhood as well, I can identify with that. And that actually led to a lot of struggles for me because I associated, because of my religion and stuff, and what happened to me as what I am as being bad, and it wasn't that I was bad. It was the person who was taking advantage of me. That person, it was assault, that was bad. And so, yeah, I use horror as well to work out, not just that, but other traumas. It is cathartic. It is powerful. Horror is very powerful for healing, and you never, ever think of it that way or hear about it explained as that, in such a eloquent way as you have. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. And thanks for letting me, it is long. and it was not my intention to hijack any time, but I'm telling you right now, just being able to read that aloud, I've never read it aloud, and just being able to do it here, even if this didn't go up on a podcast, just being able to read it to you two, I can't tell you. You always think the gorilla is off your back and that you've made progress, but even just reading it, I felt a big gorilla get off of my back. So thank you two for listening.
No, thank you for sharing. Yeah, no, that, like I said, I read it before in your blog, but having you speak it, I mean, it just touched me all over again. And I would like the name, address, and social security number of this person that hurt you, John. Going out.
Yeah, I tell you, it's yeah, there was, and it forced me to confront myself as far as one of the great ironies. One thing that there's some things from my Christian faith in the past, and when I say in the past, I still consider myself a Christian. Those who, in that context, in that church, they probably no longer consider me a Christian. I would be very, quote unquote, what they would call liberal, and in the quote unquote in the camp of the enemy. I don't care anymore. I don't give a shit. But when you start being honest with yourself, the whole reason I say all that, there are some things from the Bible I do carry forth with me, and one of those things is to not carry a root of bitterness. And it's not because of the whole element of, because it's sin and it's going to drag me to hell. It's going to drag me to a place in myself that I just don't want to be anymore. Yeah. I don't, quote unquote, forgive this person. There's kind of this struggle, and this is not just Christianity, this is in life in general, that to forgive someone you must forget. No, I'm never I'm never going to forget this, but I'm also not going to carry it with me. I'm not going to let it drag me to the bottom of the sea and drown me. So
definitely.
Thank you, John, for coming and speaking to us.
But that's
wonderful to have you on our show. Our first.
Thank you.
Our inaugural show.
It's such a privilege, and about the only thing I can, something I didn't add in this blog, but I get to add it here, was I went back to that Sam's location. It's so funny to think about Sam's, during that time when it first came out. I went back to that Sam's location, and I got my very own copy. And it has been one thing that has stayed with me all these years. It's so funny. There's tape on the dust jacket, but it was so cathartic reading that book, and it made such an impact. And that's not necessarily it's not so much singing the praises of Stephen King, just horror literature. It's much more powerful than you think it is. And thank you for just letting me share that here. So.
No worries. Thank you so much, John. I can't thank you enough for being our first victim, because like I said, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
Oh, y'all are awesome. Y'all are awesome. So looking forward to more episodes of this show, and I've so enjoyed what y'all have shared with the Denver Horror Collective, how we met each other, in that group. And I'm just glad you guys are getting out there in the world with what you've got in your own lives and your work. So when I found out you guys were doing a podcast, I was just so excited. I'm like, yes. I can't get it out there, so I can't hit the subscribe button fast enough. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to the Burial Plot podcast with your hosts, Joy Yaley and Brenda Tolian. Jeamus Wilkes, thank you so much for being our guest. We have really, really enjoyed our time with you. You can find me at my website, which is www.joyyaley.com. And Brenda, can you tell people where to find you?
At brendatolian.com.
And Jeamus, where can we find out more about you?
Jeamus.com, Jeamus. That's it.
And how about the Horror Writers Association? Where can we find out more about them and StokerCon?
I believe it's hwa.org. That is so horrible, but I promise I'll find out the website. And if you guys have show notes that you put up with your episode, I will have the proper links there. Yeah, I'm so used to just hitting a button and going to the site that sorry, the address is.
No problem. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed our deep dive and autopsy of Jeamus Wilkes. Until next time, stay above ground.
All right.
All right.
See you both. Everybody. Love you both. You guys have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
Thanks.